Welcome to the official podcast of Vienna Shadows, a secret society uncovering Vienna's hidden mysteries. Lean back and enjoy the show.
Imagine your 1920s occult detective looks into a dusty coffeehouse mirror, rolls the dice, and fails an intellect check.
Oh, man.
Right. And before you can even reach for your character sheet, the glass shatters outward, and this cosmic crystalline hound from the year 2020 crawls through the frame to hunt you down.
It is such a brutal visual.
It really is.
Yeah.
So today we are doing a deep dive into a time travel setting where the future isn't, a destination. It's an active predatory monster.
Yeah, it completely redefines the genre. I mean, for any game master preparing to run the Vienna Shadows tabletop RPG, this new expansion, the one covering retro-causality and temporal displacement, it requires a massive shift in perspective.
Yeah, because we're so used to standard sci-fi time travel, right?
Right.
Like sleek silver cars, flux capacitors, the freedom to just ride the timeline like an open river.
Exactly, but this game strips all of that away entirely.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive. I really want to build a comprehensive audio guide for the GMs out there who are trying to balance, the 1920s jazzpunk aesthetics with occult alchemy, and then this completely wild concept of chrono horror.
Yeah, it's a lot to juggle at the table.
It is. So to start us off, if time isn't an open river in this game, how does the source material actually define it?
Well, the lore ties the very concept of time to the physical, ancient architecture of Vienna itself.
Okay.
The timeline is trapped in these rigid geological harmonics. And to really understand how that works, we kind of have to look at the foundational figure in this setting, which is Emperor Rudolf II.
Right. He was ruling in the, late 1500s and early 1600s?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I know Rudolf historically as this Habsburg emperor who was just obsessed with alchemy and the occult. But the game positions him as, the first chronomancer.
Yeah, that's his title in the lore. He wasn't just messing around with standard physical alchemy, trying to turn lead into gold or whatever. Right. He was working deep in his subterranean laboratories under the Hofburg Palace, and he was collaborating with the famous mathematician Johannes Kepler.
Oh, wow. Kepler is in this.
Oh, yeah. And the sources state that together, they cracked the Rudolphine chrono equations.
So they basically discovered the math behind time travel in the 16th century.
Exactly. Well, actually, wait. I mean, the sources go further than just a theoretical discovery. They found that time over Vienna's specific ancient ley lines, it doesn't flow continuously.
Right.
It operates in these rigid 100-year harmonic resonance strata, so the continuum is sort of fractured into these century-wide blocks.
Let me see if I have my head around this, because as a GM, visualizing the world for the players is like half the battle.
Oh, absolutely.
So if time isn't a flowing river, it's more like an underground parking garage.
Okay, I like that.
And every floor is exactly 100 years apart, stacked perfectly on top of each other, going straight down into the earth.
That analogy actually maps perfectly to the mechanics. The characters were moving between these fixed subterranean nodes, so those floors of your parking garage.
Right.
And they pulse on century intervals beneath the Vienna woods and the catacombs. And Rudolf didn't just write down the math to prove these floors existed. He built an elevator.
An elevator?
Or rather, a machine called the Athanor of Kronos.
The word Athanor usually refers to an alchemical furnace.
It does, yeah. And the manual describes this specific furnace as being just massive, and it's powered by pulverized meteoric iron and black Danube salt.
Okay, what is the significance of those materials? Because, that sounds like incredible set dressing to describe to your players.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if there's an actual mechanical reason for it.
There totally is. So meteoric iron represents material from outside the Earth's temporal sphere.
Oh, that's smart.
Right. So that makes it immune to chronological decay. And then the black salt acts as a grounding agent for the local ley lines. So Rudolf uses this furnace to project his consciousness forward in time. He becomes the first human to literally look down through those garage floors. But the vision completely shatters his sanity.
What does he see? What breaks his mind?
He catches glimpses of the inevitable fall of his dynasty, for one. But then the mechanized, muddy slaughter of the Great War in the 1910s.
Yeah.
And eventually, the neon-lit digital nightmares of our 21st century, the shock of all that forces him to hide his coded manuscripts, and those hidden equations eventually become the foundational grimoires for the time-traveling cults that operate in the game's core setting, which is the 1920s.
Okay, so those underground parking garage floors, those are the playable areas for the game.
Exactly.
The sources lay out specific centuries you can visit. You've got the 1520s and 1620s, which is Rudolf's era, marked by alchemical breakthroughs, but also the brutal Turkish sieges of Vienna.
Yes.
Then the 1720s with the plague column. The 1820s, which the game treats as the past, the Biedermeier era. And the manual specifically mentions Beethoven running around composing these deafening non-Euclidean counterpoints.
Oh, that detail about Beethoven is just a brilliant auditory hazard for a GM to employ.
Wait, unpack that for me. Because non-Euclidean usually means geometry that defies the laws of physics, like lines intersecting where they shouldn't.
Right.
How does that apply to counterpoint music?
Well, normally music follows mathematical rules of harmony based on standard acoustic space, you know?
Yeah.
But in this lore, Beethoven is tapping into the chrono equations. He's writing music where the notes literally curve around impossible angles in the air.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it creates sounds that human ears literally haven't evolved to process. So listening to his raw, unfinished symphonies in the 1820s can actually physically damage a player's sanity.
That is deeply unsettling and just a great tool for a tabletop encounter.
Totally.
So after the 1820s, you have the 1920s, which is the present of the game, this jazzpunk interwar republic. But then you drop down a floor to the 2020s, which the sources ominously call the distant horizon, a hyper-technological glass and steel Vienna.
And notice how the lore positions our modern era. To the 1920s characters, the 2020s is not some sort of technological utopia.
Right.
The digital grids, the ubiquitous screens, the constant wireless signals, they act as an invisible synthetic prison. It's either holding back cosmic entities, or worse, it's acting as an antenna to broadcast their madness instantly to millions of smartphones.
That is such a cool flip on the standard time travel trope.
Yeah.
And then at the very bottom of the garage, the 2120s, the void future.
Yes.
A silent post-human wasteland where the outer gods just walk the empty streets.
It's terrifying.
It is. So if time is locked into these rigid architectural layers beneath the city, how do the players actually break through the concrete, so to speak, to get to the next floor?
Okay, so the game provides 3 primary paradigms of temporal displacement, and I should note they are all incredibly unstable.
Okay, good to know.
The first is what they call the Rudolphine mind shift. This operates on a sort of Yithian-style consciousness swap.
When you say Yithian style, you're referencing H.P. Lovecraft's mythos, right? The alien race that hijacks bodies across time.
That's the one. Yeah, the mind travels, but the physical body stays behind in its home century. So a 1920s investigator uses Rudolph's alchemical ciphers to launch their consciousness into the future, and they take over the body of someone living in that era.
Hold on. Stop right there.
Yeah.
If my 1920s investigator jumps into the body of, say, a 2020s subway technician, that means the 1920s investigator's body is suddenly being piloted by a terrified 21st century commuter in the middle of a Weimar-era coffee house.
Yes.
How on earth is a party supposed to deal with that?
That reaction you just had is exactly what the game designers are going for. From a game master's perspective, this mechanic is designed to create immediate parallel chaos.
I can imagine.
You don't just get to leave your body in a safe sleep mode like in a sci-fi movie.
So my tabletop group now basically has to divide its attention.
Yep. You might have 2 players actively trying to defuse a bomb in the 2020s inside unfamiliar bodies, while the other 2 players are stuck in the 1920s babysitting a modern-day barista who is screaming in terror because their smart cone is gone and everyone is wearing fedoras.
That is amazing.
The NPC liability left behind in the past becomes an encounter of its own. It creates this beautiful, organic tension at the table.
I can already picture the players trying to explain a rotary phone to someone who only knows touchscreens while trying to keep them from, like, running out into the street and getting hit by a horse-drawn cab.
Exactly. It's role-playing gold.
That's fantastic.
Huh.
What are the other methods?
So for physical travel, where your actual body moves through time, you have the jazzpunk chrono resonators. These tear localized portals open.
Okay.
The sources describe these rigs as being built from brass vacuum tubes, modified tram coils, and those meteoric iron tuning forks we mentioned earlier.
The manual says these resonators blast high-frequency jazzpunk waltzes in reverse, utilizing the Sator-Repo formula. Now, I know the Sator square is a famous historical Latin palindrome that reads the same forwards, backwards, up and down.
Right.
But why does reversing a jazz waltz, using this math, create a portal?
It comes down to acoustic physics within the game's magic system. Since time in Vienna Shadows is a rigid harmonic loop, sound is the key to manipulating it.
Okay, following.
A palindrome reads the same in any direction. By forcing a complex, syncopated jazz waltz through a mathematical palindrome in reverse, the machine creates a localized contradiction in the timeline.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it acts as a sonic wedge that forces the strata to crack open just enough to slip through.
That is top-tier world building. Acoustic friction ripping a hole in time. But I assume those portals don't stay open long.
Only for a few minutes. It demands a really fast smash-and-grab approach to time travel. And then finally, you have the Tincture of Chronos. These are alchemical potions brewed from Hallstatt salt that grant temporary physical slips. Very risky, highly toxic if overused.
Got it. Now, if travel is this chaotic and dangerous, somebody has to be weaponizing it. Let's talk about the puppet masters pulling the strings behind the scenes.
The sources outline 4 main factions engaged in a Centurial war, and they're all defined by their colored robes. Their differing agendas really shape the kinds of campaigns a GM can run.
So who are we looking at first?
First, you have the Black Robes. Their core doctrine is total temporal entropy. They believe the structured strata of time is an artificial prison.
So they just want to break the loop entirely.
Exactly.
Their tactical goal is essentially apocalyptic then.
Yeah.
They want to tear open the centurial valves simultaneously, just crash 1520, 1920, and 2020 all together into a single non-linear nightmare.
Yeah.
They sound like your pure chaos antagonists, like the cultists you send in when you need a violent encounter at the table.
Contrast them with the Golden Robes, who represent the eternal imperial dynasty.
Okay, what's their deal?
They want order, but specifically authoritarian order. They use Rudolph's formulas to send intelligence and resources forward to the 2020s.
Oh, so they sound like timeline venture capitalists. They're trying to secure corporate dominance in the future to maintain authoritarian control in the past. It's like an Ouroboros of capitalism and empire.
It is a very grounded, recognizable evil. You can easily imagine a 1920s industrialist funding a 2020s tech monopoly.
Definitely.
But then we get to the Crimson Robes, who view time as a vast historical archive. The main branch acts as universal chroniclers. They are the ones sending field archivists back to the 1820s to record Beethoven's unwritten notes.
Right. But the outline also mentions the Crimson Archivists are sending agents to the 2020s to study the, quote, psychological decay caused by digital information networks.
Yes.
I am fascinated by this. Are they essentially treating our modern era like an eldritch horror setting?
This is perhaps the most brilliant role-playing twist in the entire expansion. Think about the mindset of a character born in the 1800s or 1900s. To them, we live in a nightmare. Constant sensory overload, synthetic lighting, and this immediate global awareness of every tragedy on Earth just constantly vibrating in our pockets.
So what we consider mundane, like a smartphone or a digital billboard is, to a 1920s occultist, an incomprehensible artifact of mass psychological control.
We'll get into how that works mechanically in a moment, but philosophically, yes, absolutely. The factions highlight how different eras view one another.
So who is the fourth group?
To round out the groups, there's a splinter cell of the Crimson Robes called the Crimson Cracked Branch. They operate safe houses in every century, and they use consecrated Hallstatt salt to seal open rifts.
Okay, so they act as the immune system of the timeline.
Exactly.
So if I'm a GM, the Cracked Branch are likely my primary quest givers. They're the ones hiring the player party to prevent the past from being destabilized by future tech or Black Robe sabotage.
That's the most common campaign structure, yes.
Yeah. Right. Now, if these factions are actively ripping time apart, what does that actually do to a player's mind when they get caught in the crossfire? As a GM, you need mechanics to represent that trauma at the table. How does the system handle this?
The mechanics of Chrono Horror are built seamlessly into the game's existing D6 roll-under system.
Right.
The core attributes are strength, intellect, charisma, and perception, all starting with a base of 3. You roll a standard 6-sided die, and you just need to roll under your attribute to succeed.
Simple, brutal, and fast. I love that. How do the temporal mechanics layer on top of that?
They've introduced something called Centurial Vertigo. This is a baseline sanity threat. Whenever a character jumps across a century, say, stepping out of a portal into the 1820s or the 2020s, they must immediately make a sanity check.
And if they fail?
If they fail, their senses literally fail to parse the architecture, the smell of the air, and the background noise of the era.
Mechanically, the rulebook says they take 1 point of sanity damage and suffer a +1 difficulty modifier to all checks for a full hour while they acclimatize. That is punishing when a jazzpunk portal only stays open for 5 minutes.
It really forces them to act while severely impaired.
But the mechanic I really want to dig into is future shock dissonance.
Oh, this is a great one. This triggers when a 1920s character tries to interact with artifacts from the 2020s. Electronic tablets, synthetic clothing materials, modern firearms. They have to roll under their intellect just to comprehend and use the item.
I have to push back on the severity of the failure state here, though.
Okay, why?
Because if a player rolls a critical failure, which in this system is rolling a 6 on that intellect check, they go temporarily blind for 1d6 rounds.
Yes, they do.
Going blind just from looking at an iPad? Come on, as a GM, I feel like my players would riot. It feels like an overly punishing penalty for just failing to swipe a screen.
It sounds harsh if you're evaluating it as a piece of consumer electronics. But this is where the GM's narrative framing is totally vital. You have to explain the why behind the mechanic to your players.
Okay, sell it to me.
The character isn't just confused by the user interface. Their 1920s brain is physically rejecting the object.
Rejecting it how?
Think about the impossible geometry of millions of shifting illuminated pixels, the unnatural glow that casts no real shadows on the face, the smooth synthetic polymers that simply do not exist in nature at that time.
Okay, that paints a picture.
Right. The 1920s visual cortex attempts to process this alien geometry, fails entirely, and protects itself from permanent sanity loss by just shutting down.
Oh, wow. So it's not, I don't know how to open this app. It's my mind cannot process the physical existence of this object in my hand, so my brain is pulling the emergency brake.
Exactly. It grounds the concept of future shock into visceral life-or-death stakes. If your player tries to use a modern assault rifle they looted from a Golden Robe operative and they critically fail, they don't just fumble the safety catch.
Right.
They go blind in the middle of a firefight because their brain can't accept the materials the gun is made of.
That completely changes how I would describe the scene as a GM. I love that. And then there's the paradox hunt.
Ah, yes.
If a player alters a major historical event, they trigger an immediate intellect check. If they fail, the timeline frays, and a Hound of the Void smells the tear.
And it enters the current era through the nearest reflective surface to hunt down the source of the paradox.
Hence the mirror shattering in our opening scenario.
Yeah.
You mess with history, you fail the roll, and a cosmic hound jumps through the nearest window to eat you. Highly cinematic.
It keeps them from abusing the time travel.
Definitely. Now that we have the lore and these brutal mechanics, let's look at how the authors suggest pacing an adventure. The book includes a sample scenario called the Rudolf II Relay.
Yeah, it's structured in a classic 3-act format designed to seamlessly introduce a new group of players to these exact mechanics.
Act 1 is the hook. It's 1925, and municipal road repairs are happening on the Michaelplatz right outside the Hofburg Palace. Workers uncover an airtight brass capsule stamped with Rudolf II's alchemical seal from the 1500s.
Right.
But inside is a glowing, quartz-like electronic microchip stamped with the date 2025.
Which immediately hands the players a physical paradox. An intellect check on the parchment inside the capsule reveals that Rudolf foresaw a temporal anchor beneath the Hofburg cracking in 1925.
Okay.
He buried this future component centuries ago so the players could use it as a repair module in the present.
A perfectly planted retro-causal breadcrumb. It essentially tells the players the timeline is already relying on you to fix it.
Exactly.
That leads into Act 2, the vault. To activate this microchip, the party has to descend into the deepest subvaults of the imperial crypt to find Rudolf's original Athanor of Kronos.
But the Golden Robes are already there.
Of course they are.
They've set up a perimeter and are actively trying to calibrate the gate to 2025 to extract advanced automated weaponry for their own authoritarian goals.
The adventure gives the players options here. They can engage the guards using strengths for direct combat, or use charisma to disguise themselves as imperial occult officers.
But no matter what approach they take, the machine overloads during the confrontation. It rips open a Centurial portal and drags the entire party 100 years into the future.
Which brings us to Act 3, the Glass Labyrinth. The players emerge in the 2020s, specifically into the underground pedestrian passage of modern Karlsplatz in Vienna.
Yes, and the source material describes this station as a bewildering maze of glowing electronic advertisements, rushing commuters with earbuds, and smooth synthetic materials.
It is total sensory overload, and they aren't alone. An operative of the Black Robes has also slipped through the portal into the 2020s.
This is where the stakes escalate to that apocalyptic level. The Black Robe operative is attempting to upload an acoustic file of Mozart's unfinished Requiem into the city's municipal subway broadcast network.
Using Mozart's Requiem as a mass madness virus via a modern subway broadcast is such a terrifyingly specific weapon.
It really is.
But as a GM, how do you balance this encounter? Because you have the overwhelming sensory input of the 2020s transit system on one hand, and the actual mission of tracking this cultist on the other. How do you manage both threats without bogging down the pace?
The key realization for a game master here is that the 2020s transit system is the dungeon.
Oh, interesting.
You don't separate the environment from the encounter. You use the commuting crowds with their wireless earbuds, the digital turnstiles, and the flashing video advertisements as active, hostile obstacles.
Right.
Every time a player has to bypass a digital ticketing screen or navigate through the neon signage, you trigger those future shock dissonance mechanics.
So tracking the cultist using perception isn't just about spotting footprints on a platform. It's about trying to spot a dark robe through a sea of LED screens and fluorescent lights without your brain shutting down from the visual input.
Exactly. They have to fight through their own future shock just to physically reach the cultist. And then they either have to smash the broadcast server with brute force or use an alchemical ceiling spike on the node before the sound file transmits to thousands of commuters.
Man, what an encounter. Let's talk about the epilogue states because they offer great consequences.
Sure.
If the players succeed, they return to the gateway, jump back to 1925, slot the microchip into the ancient machinery, and stabilize the anchor. And the reward from the cracked branch is an item called Rudolf II's chrono lens.
It's an alchemical eyepiece. The wearer can look through it and see the room exactly as it existed 100 years in the past, or as it will exist 100 years in the future, but only for one single round.
A brilliant investigative tool for a GM to seed clues for the rest of the campaign.
It really is.
But the failure state.
Huh?
If they fail to stop the upload or fix the anchor, the Centurial boundaries shatter. The architecture of 1525, 1925, and 2025 physically collides along the city's Ringstrasse.
The visual of that collision is just staggering. The sources discuss horse carriages swerving around electric sports cars, medieval plague doctors wandering past flashing video billboards,
Wow.
and the Golden Robes seizing absolute power by using 16th century royal edicts enforced by 21st century surveillance technology.
That failure state is a perfect example of why the stakes in Vienna Shadows are so high. It's not just a game over screen. It fundamentally breaks the setting in the most compelling way possible, giving the GM a whole new world to run.
It does, and it also leaves us with one final, terrifying implication for any game master planning a long-term campaign.
Okay, hit me. We've seen that this expansion makes time itself a physical, sanity-draining antagonist at the table. But what is the ultimate threat? What is at the very bottom of the well?
Consider this detail. The source material focuses heavily on the playable eras, right? The 1820s, the 1920s, and the 2020s.
Right.
But it briefly mentions the absolute bottom floor of that parking garage, the 2120s.
Yeah, the void future we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. It describes it as a silent, post-human wasteland where the outer gods walk unimpeded.
Right.
So, if time is a rigid loop and consciousness displacement, the mind shift is a known mechanic. What happens if a player character's mind is accidentally swapped into the 2120s?
Oh, no. They wouldn't swap into a subway technician. There are no humans left.
Exactly. What if their consciousness is forced into the mind of one of those outer gods? Or into one of their twisted remaining thralls wandering that crystallized wasteland?
Oh, man.
Perhaps the true endgame of a Vienna Shadows campaign isn't just surviving the current century. It's desperately trying to prevent that specific 2120s void future from solidifying into historical fact.
Because if the future is already written in the geology of Vienna, how do you unwrite an apocalypse that is waiting for you exactly 100 years from now?
Right.
That is the kind of existential dread that will keep a gaming table up at night.
Yeah.
A perfect thought to leave your players with and a perfect place to end this deep dive.
This concludes today's episode.
Don't forget to rate and subscribe. Until next time, Vienna Shadows, signing off.